Good evening, everyone. I call to order the Tuesday, November 12th meeting of the Victoria City Council. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first off, welcome everyone. A few announcements for you. On November 18th at 1 p.m., Commissioner Maluchnik will be hosting a meeting at City Hall to discuss a potential park and ride in Victoria. Representatives from the county, city, Southwest Transit will be in attendance, and there may be a possible quorum of the council as well. So we're going to post that in accordance with the open meeting law, there could be a quorum. Just to let you know. Public's welcome to attend that meeting. That will be in here, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Next, there'll be a budget workshop on Monday, November 25th at 5 p.m. to discuss the 2020 budget, I assume, and provide direction to staff on the preparation of the final budget. Sorry. The public is invited to attend and provide input at that meeting. Wassermann Lake Park financing will also be discussed at the November 25th workshop. Additionally, during the regular City Council meeting on November 25th at 6:30, the public will be invited to provide comment on the 2020 budget. Staff will also be available to answer any questions. On December 9th at 5:30, there'll be a council workshop to discuss the 2020 legislative policies. And finally, there'll be a council meeting on December 16th at 6 p.m., at which time the council is expected to adopt the 2020 budget and the 2020 through 2025 capital improvement plan. By the way, that meeting is changed from the regular Mondays, if you look at the calendar, due to the Christmas holiday. So just note that, if you would, please. Finally, all meetings of the City Council will be held at the City Hall council chambers unless otherwise noted. The public is always welcomed and encouraged to attend. Anything else, Dana, or is that all?
That's all, Mayor.
Okay, next we have the open forum. I do have one slip here in front of me. Kevin, is it Sharp?
Yes.
Kevin, please introduce yourself and your church.
Yes. Well, my name is Kevin Sharp, and I was talking to Judy the other day, and she suggested that I come here and just introduce myself. I'm the pastor of Westbrook Church, which is going in at where I have land at the southwest corner of Engler and Jonathan Carver Parkway. And so hopefully we'll start building in April. And so I just wanted to come and introduce myself and be a good neighbor and let you know that we want to be involved in the community as we move out here. So
Welcome.
Well, thank you.
you.
Welcome. Yeah,
Yeah,
welcome to the
yeah,
community.
yeah.
The for the public, that's on the southwest
West.
corner of County Roads 11 and County Road 10, correct?
yes,
Okay.
correct. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We also noted that you're also on the committee on the small area plan.
Yes.
Discussing our commercial area down there, so
Yes.
that's exciting. So
Meeting tomorrow.
Thank you for joining on that as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Super. Well, welcome again.
Uh-huh.
The anyone else that wants to address the council? Okay. Next, adopt the final agenda. First, can I have a motion to adopt the final agenda from the council, please?
Motion to adopt the final agenda?
A second, please.
Second.
Discussion. Dana, I think you had an item.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, members of the council, staff would like to recommend pulling item number 7.2. That's your item relating to the county's request to preserve right-of-way as it relates to your Marsh Lake Road improvement project. Staff were made aware this afternoon of some correspondence that council received over the last couple of days, including today from residents, property owners, and their respective attorneys, just regarding some questions, some concerns related to the county's letter. And with, you may have noticed our city attorney is not able to be with us tonight because of the change in date with the holiday yesterday. And so it would be staff's recommendation to give our city attorney an opportunity to review and provide some comment to council related to some of the questions and concerns raised within that correspondence. And then we also thought to have a more productive conversation As we anticipate some dialogue and some questions, and we would like our county or our city attorney to be in attendance for that. So it would be staff's recommendation to pull item 7.2 and postpone that to a later date.
Council, without objection, so noted. Any objections? No?
Just out of curiosity, I think the letter is fairly self-explanatory. I know there may be some legal nuances that we might not be able to get to, but I would be in favor of just having it just somewhat of a high-level discussion. We do have people in the audience that they did take time out to come to this meeting to listen to that. I'd be happy to weigh in. I'm actually anxious to weigh in.
Council, discussion, comments?
I prefer not to discuss it because of the legal ramifications.
And we did, when we found out about this, we did send emails to the residents telling them that we were going to postpone it, so I would prefer to wait until we,
I wasn't aware that we sent out any emails to residents.
I asked because when it was recommended that we move it to a later date, I said the people that would be in attendance would be upset if they came in and we had it moved, so I asked that
Okay, that was
we let them know.
a decision made outside of council. Thank you, though.
Wait a minute,
Yeah.
was that wrong?
No, I mean, you can email residents and do that, but Dana, I think you need to weigh in here, though, as to what happened.
Mayor, members of the council, it's not unusual for staff to correspond with residents, and when we have items that come up on the agenda or if items get moved, it's not unusual for staff to reach out to somebody who may have expressed interest. So if notes go directly to us, we try to keep people informed to the best of our ability, to the extent that we were aware of anything, and this isn't just for this item, we would do this for any related items when we're talking about stop sign petitions. For example, recently when we, there's all sorts of different examples where staff would take the liberty to reach out to residents just to keep them informed on stuff. We don't want to always rely on people that we know are interested in an item to follow or subscribe to things, and we want to make sure that we're trying to do some outreach and being good community partners, and that when we know something, the way that we expressed this particular thing wasn't that the item was being moved, it was that staff will be recommending that the item be postponed.
And that's I think that's the key issue here, because only the council can remove something once the agenda's been posted, and they
That
have
is
to do that
correct.
in a council meeting. So, given that, Councilmember Gravy, given the fact that some residents could have easily misinterpreted that this item was going to be removed, would you have objections if we delay the discussion on this so that those residents can attend, since I think they're under the impression that this was not going to be discussed?
That's fine.
Okay. So we've got a valid motion to approve the agenda. Let me do one thing just to make this clear for Cindy. I move that we modify the initial motion to exclude the pulling item 7.2 off of the agenda. Can I get a second on that?
Second motion.
Okay, on the amended motion now, approving the agenda minus option 7.2, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, we have now adopted the modified agenda. And consent agenda is next. Can I have a motion to please approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second, please.
Second?
Discussion. Council, staff, anybody in the audience, anything that anybody wants pulled off the consent agenda? Hearing and seeing nothing, all in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Consent agenda is approved. All right, the first item up for bid tonight. Ann, you do the short straw.
Sure.
This is-
Good eve-
I'm sorry, this is item 7.1, accept the Wassermann Lake Park plans, and with that, Ann, please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, Council. This evening, we are going to be going through a little bit of history and then moving into the agenda item, which is the 60% park plan set for Lake Wassermann Park, and then seeking the council's direction on approving the bid for a boardwalk and also oak pruning and removal. So within your packet tonight, you have the cooperative agreement, the second cooperative agreement that was approved back in May, the construction cost estimate, the updated one for the park. We've also got plan sets for the boardwalk and also plan sets for the park project itself. So tonight with us, Anna Brown from the Watershed District is here. We also have Carlos Fernandez, who is with AFLA, who is our consultant, landscape architect for the project, and he's here to help answer any questions that the council may have as we move through the project. So with that, I'm going to bring up Anna to go through a little history for you.
Thank you,
You've never been
Mayor
here
Funk.
before, have you?
Yes, my first time at council. Thank you for having me again. Again, Anna Brown of Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. I am primarily going to present on the sort of site restoration component of this design, but I do first want to sort of ground us again in some of the partnership aspects, sort of where this project came from and how it fits in our broader vision of work in Victoria. So the sort of origin of the district's involvement out in this area, the 6 Mile Creek Halstead Bay subwatershed, was back in 2014 when we did a diagnostic assessment that looked at all of the water resource issues system-wide and really set the stage for needing to take a strategic focus in the work that we did in this area. So rather than coming in and doing a couple projects here and there, we knew that we really needed to come in and focus over a 10, 15-year time horizon to make a measurable difference with water resources. So we worked with partners out here, including the City of Victoria, to kind of establish a shared framework for how we might do that work. And with the City of Victoria, that resulted in a 2015 Memorandum of Understanding that outlined shared goals between the city and district. So what we were looking at specifically in 2015 was that we would increase coordination in permitting to reduce regulatory conflict and proactively engage the land use community around issues of water resources. It spelled out how we would share in the development of one another's plans to make sure that policies and projects were well forecasted across the two agencies so that we were working together to implement those visions. And then it also established some specific water resource goals, one of which was the restoration of Wassermann Lake, which is an impaired water body. So the MOU has really kind of paved the way for the work that the district and city have been doing together over the last 4 years. So one of the first opportunities that came to be was the investment in the downtown stormwater ponds, where the district leveraged $260,000 in clean water funds to retrofit existing stormwater ponds to facilitate downtown development. And those projects are being completed as we speak. The next is the 6 Mile Creek Halstead Bay Habitat Restoration Program, which is our long name for our carp management program, which has leveraged $600,000 across the 6 Mile Creek system to manage common carp, and this has already resulted in measurable improvement in water quality in Lake Wassermann. And then, of course, we're very familiar with the Wassermann Lake Park project, which we've already gotten kind of the water resource work underway with an alum treatment that occurred in the spring of this year. A couple of projects on the horizon. We right now have an open grant application for the alum treatment on the Wassermann Lake proper, so treating the whole lake to address internal phosphorus loading. And that would be a 2021 project. That would be about $350,000 to achieve that treatment, which would get us a significant reduction in phosphorus loading in the lake. And then finally, the Victoria Chain of Lakes Greenway, which we developed jointly and is a vision adopted in the city's comp plan that integrates water resources with parks and trail investment as well as development to kind of guide the way that we work together into the future. So now to get a little bit more into the Wassermann Lake project specifically. Oh, there's our greenway. So the Wassermann Park opportunity sort of came to be when this parcel was for sale on the private market in the beginning of 2017. We knew it contained an identified nutrient load to Wassermann Lake, the 6-acre pond on site. And so when we saw that it was for sale, we looked at both our priorities and the city's priorities to evaluate whether there was in fact a partnership opportunity here. We looked at some of the other features of the site, that it was one of the last remaining undeveloped parcels on Lake Wassermann and included 1,500 feet of undisturbed shoreline. A vast majority of the property is wetland, so it has that 22-acre wetland, as well as about 500 feet of creek running along the south of the property. From kind of a land use perspective, we identified that it achieves the city's comp plan vision of a waterfront park, sort of the first park that would give you a level of access to the lake, as well as kind of helps in that long-term trail connection opportunity. When the trail comes in on the other side of 43, this site can kind of be leveraged to bring people through the project and into the neighborhood. And then finally, from kind of a partnership perspective, it helps kind of catalyze that vision that we were working on jointly to kind of integrate land use and water resources. It achieves the goals around Wassermann Lake restoration and kind of highlights the work that's happening to restore Wassermann Lake by creating a program site on a lake that's actively improving with all the work that we're doing. And finally, we had a substantial amount of resident support from the get-go. So now to get into the sort of restoration approach on site. First and foremost, as I outlined, was the nutrient reduction project on site. So the district did leverage about $100,000 to do 2 alum treatments on the pond. Again, the first of which occurred this spring, and the second will occur in 2021, and any remaining grant dollars from that work is going to be put into the stream channel restoration, which I'll talk about in a second. In the original cooperative agreement, we had envisioned that a majority of the district's investment outside of the alum would go into wetland vegetation restoration. But as we've worked with the design team, and looking just at our own priorities, we've identified a number of other opportunistic restoration opportunities that actually sort of bring the district's investment into the site proper. So specific areas that we will be investing for restoration purposes are the prairie mound restoration. So that is section A, that's sort of the open green area on some of the previous plans that you've seen. And this will be sort of a typical prairie restoration that will include prairie seeding as well as some plugs planted for quick establishment. And that area will also feature a mowed trail so that people can come into that space without sort of disturbing the restored vegetation. The next piece of the restoration work is the stream channel restoration. So as I mentioned, there's a stream channel south of the property in zone, thank you, Ann. D. That stream channel has experienced significant down cutting. There's a lot of erosion, a lot of sediment transport to the lake. So we'll actually be going in and stabilizing the banks, restoring vegetation along the banks for stability, and then introducing some rock vein structures that kind of act as check dams that will create some pooling in areas where you already see some pooling, and also slow flow to prevent that flashiness that is really driving the erosion. And finally, the piece that's really kind of the hallmark of the site restoration is the oak savanna restoration. So that we're targeting in sort of the peninsula area, zone B. And what we'll do there, we've identified a number of specimen oak species that have been on the site for a long time that are currently being sort of competed with by ash and other kind of understory growth. And so we'll be looking to do some tree removal and kind of reestablish that oak savanna condition. So really just take advantage of those oak trees that are there and do some understory planting to establish that oak savanna condition. And then finally, with the restoration work kind of shifting into the park proper, we'll be working with your staff to develop an O&M plan for the whole site. And we'll be looking at some type of covenant structure so that the district can maintain the vegetation in the areas where it's investing and sort of reduce the overall O&M burden for the city with that work. And before I turn it over, I just wanted to put a little bit of a finer point on the woodland management component. The picture here is one of our earlier site pictures, and it really shows that oak savanna condition in the woodland area. The vegetation there is much less dense, and it hasn't had those other tree species come in and sort of compete. So the sort of current site condition, where you do have a lot of competition from ash and box elder, has been driven by a lack of fire as well as invasion of buckthorn that's really affected the understory growth. So what we're looking to do here is to just really reestablish that understory growth and that condition that the site historically was in with this management. So some of the specific goals around the woodland management are to remove all ash except those that are eligible for treatment. So we've been working with Anne and a city forester that you guys have worked with before to look at some trees that might be good candidates for preservation for ash, but otherwise in anticipation of EAB looking to do a lot of ash removal. Again, that'll kind of open up the understory and establish more vegetation growth in that wooded area. And then finally, a piece of this project is to manage those specimen oaks for tree health and hazard prevention. So doing some hazard limb removal, which is a piece of the approvals this evening. So with that ash removal, we are proposing to replant trees at a greater than 1-to-1 rate, particularly kind of around that prairie knoll area and in some of the more built areas of the park. And then there's also proposed to be almost 200 shrubs added to the site. So while the canopy will change, there's a high level of replacement to account for that. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Anne, and then we can answer questions at the end.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. So at the last council meeting, or the council meeting prior to, we brought the concept plan that we have moved from, that was approved about a year ago. And the amenities include trails, parking, shelter, restrooms, island access via the boardwalk, nature play areas, and then again, Anna talked about site restoration. So 60% plan update is very similar, but we've gotten into a little more nuts and bolts with the landscape architect. But generally, the plan remains the same from when the last time that you saw this information. So I want to talk a little bit about the boardwalk, because that's one of the things that the council will be asked to authorize the bidding on tonight. And then I also want to talk about the second access a little bit that was on the original concept plan and why that is not moving forward. Right now, the boardwalk is roughly about 460 feet of boardwalk, and then that will access the island, which is in the north part of the park. It's a very unique site, and one that we feel is important for people when the park is done to be able to access. And the reason why we have to go with the boardwalk is because it basically goes through wetland. That's the only way you can get in, unless it's wintertime, and then you could access it through the ice. But the estimated cost on that boardwalk came in at about $385,000. And just to kind of give you an idea of what the boardwalk looks like, and then again, the location. Basically, we're going through wetland through that entire stretch. Otherwise, we would have trail in there, but we can't. We need to put boardwalk in so people can access that island. Again, I know Anna talked a little bit about the tree and brush removal, and then the replanting and stream bank restoration, and their budget for this work that generally speaking, the Minnehaha Creek District is paying for is roughly about $300,000 to $350,000 that they will be contributing to this project. One of the things that is driving the both of these projects is because this work really needs to happen in the wintertime. Oak trimming is a good winter project, and the boardwalk construction also is a great winter project because they've got to access the site somehow, and they'll come in through the ice, and that is the best time to do the boardwalk construction. So again, I know Anna touched on it. This is the island area, and then this is the main park area. And that's where a significant amount of ash trees will be removed. But then again, as the park projects comes together next year, there will be tree planting back within the park. But the goal is to really create that oak savanna that once was on this site. Part of the process will also be salvaging wood. The park plan itself calls for utilizing some of the tree removal for the nature play area, and some of the logs for the play area, and then also some of the log walls that are included in the park plan. So we'll be utilizing a lot of the wood that does come down within the park projects itself. So the schedule that we're looking at to stay on target for construction in 2020 would be to approve the bids or schedule for the bidding and construction in wintertime. So we'd be looking at approving bids, letting the bids in November, approving the bids probably later November, early December with a winter construction. And I know that the Watershed District Board met last week on the project, and if you've got questions with Ann, I know they are moving forward with that. So, and then I wanted to touch a little bit of, actually I want to go back to the boardwalk. On the original concept plan that we had been operating with for about a year, did include a second access near the shelter area. The reason that it's not included within this project, based on additional findings and further information being provided through going on the site, and you don't get into that process until you move forward with getting past the concept plan. So part of the problem is that there's a significant amount of cattails, and also the water is very, very shallow in this location. So in order to get out to an area where you could actually fish or utilize the water access, we're looking at about 400 to 500 feet of dock getting out to about 3 feet of water. Also, providing ADA access down to the lake access would also require substantial dollars. And I'm not sure if an estimate was done, but I think we're guessing it at about another $500,000 just to get an access at that location, that based on the length of the pier and getting down to that access, I mean, you're looking almost at 2 football fields to get out into the lake, which is not something that people with a kayak are going to be able to access or use if they're not going to take their kayak from the parking lot and go another 600 feet, 3 football fields to take their kayak out. So, and the cost of the access would really jump up the project cost. So that's why that has been taken out, and at least we're not looking at it right now. So moving on with the financial contribution from the Watershed District, I know Anna touched on it a little bit, but in total they will or will have provided about $905,000 of work to this project, and will continue to do so in the operation and maintenance of the park as we move forward. So with that, I am certainly open to questions. Anna is here tonight, and again, our landscape architect is here this evening with questions.
Thank you, Ann. Council, questions?
And does the elimination of that dock offset the cost of the boardwalk? I know we had concerns about the cost of that boardwalk.
No, the second access, when we got the additional information on what it would take to get down to the site, down to the lake, and then also having to extend out, that 500 feet at a staff level, the cost to do that just seemed to be too much for this project to handle, so it was removed as we move forward with the design.
Okay. Is it okay?
Yep, go ahead. No.
Looking at well, I didn't know if it was my turn or not. I'm looking at the original map, and it had winter ice skating, summer kayak, winter ice skating access. It had a overlook porch, picnic pavilion. It had a warming house.
Let me interrupt for a second. Do we have a map so that
The
I can see it,
original-
but I'd like the public to be able to see what's going on too?
It had a warming house so that they could skate. So what you're telling me is that we can't access any of the lake from the park other than the island?
Trying to find
The original, that's the.
yeah,
new
I
one.
do not have that on my.
Yeah, but I think for the public's benefit, but put your cursor, you just had your cursor there
Yeah,
where
I'm
the pavilion
I'm
is.
trying to see where I can, make it larger here. Yep. So there was, yeah, so I want to just go back a little bit about the concept plan. When we first started this project, about 2 years ago, we had significant public input and also input from the Park and Rec Committee. We were kind of given a blank slate of how do we want the project to look and how do we want to program the park? And a lot of time was spent on, in these public meetings, gathering that input from the public, and several ideas popped up. I know the ice skating was one of them, and also that second kayak access. So again, just in the concept stages. So we had no idea what sort of elevations, what sort of condition the lake was going to provide us to get that access. Once we started doing some of that initial engineering work, it became pretty evident quickly that getting access down to the lake from the higher elevation where this pavilion is going to sit, there's probably about a good 15-foot drop from this top down to the lake. And in order to provide ADA access, you've got to make all the slopes at maximum of 5%. So you're going to have a lot of cross trail work to get down to the pier itself. Also, the lake condition just didn't warrant the dock itself or accessing the water, just because of the distance of the earth underneath the water here in this location. But the skating went out pretty quickly just because we couldn't get access down to the lake from a person using the lake to flooding the lake to providing ice or to providing lighting for the ice skaters, because you need that at this time of winter. So the cost just and the complications with getting down to the water just became a cost factor that we had to look at once we started moving forward with the design, further with the design.
So then what we've got is another park that we can look at a lake, other than on the island. They can walk out on a fishing pier.
I don't even think we have a lake or a park that you can look out at a lake even right now.
Well, we have downtown.
Damn.
Right.
We have the beach and dock, the lake in the park,
Auburn?
Auburn.
That's
Start Auburn.
that's Three Rivers, yeah.
Yeah,
Three
Yeah.
Rivers.
it's part of
Yeah.
Victoria. Oh,
Yes, yes.
Seems to me we're losing a lot.
We are losing a lot, and
With the interactivity, without the skating pond, the kayak.
the warming house, I mean, all of these things are are things for the people to do and to use, and it's nice that we're gonna have nature and a prairie and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know, I was trying to figure out how could we not know that it wasn't deep enough there, and I started looking at online to try to find a map of the lake, and I actually found it on the watershed district. In 2011, it was mapped. And it, by you guys,
You mean the watershed?
the watershed, and it showed that there were 2 feet and then it goes out. I don't know,
Should we let Anna respond?
Councilmember Black, I'm familiar with the map. Thank you.
okay, so I just don't understand how we didn't know this.
Sure. Councilmember Black, Councilmember Vogt, a couple of questions I think embedded in here. I mean, one thing I want to address is just the process that we've run from concept plan to present. So when we first developed the concept plan, it was sort of a tool to make sure that we had agreement on sort of general vision and direction for the site. So that was a concept plan that looks similar to the one that is sort of the old concept plan that was adopted, but is a previous iteration that just kind of looked at general site use. Then we hired a landscape architect to sort of refine the concept plan, which is the one that you're referring to that has a bunch of site amenities identified. The way that we reached that was primarily through sort of public engagement, wanting to understand how people wanted to use the site, and things that were thrown out included the skating piece, included the access component, as well as some other kind of winter uses and summer uses. Then we went through about a year-long process of trying to understand where the budget was and where the priorities were, working with City Council, working with the Parks and Rec Commission, and there were some items that just kind of quickly fell out. Skating is a good example where when you layer in including a warming hut, when you think about O&M, when you think about visibility of the sort of skating piece and whether people would really use it, it didn't seem like it made sense to pursue that option. And we did work with the Park and Rec Committee to sort of confirm that that was an okay direction to go in as far as the programming. So the skating piece, while it is still shown on that early concept plan because we were no longer working with a landscape architect at that point, so that change isn't reflected in the visual, but it was kind of part of the decision that we had made moving into this phase of design. As far as the lake access piece, I think I spoke to this last time, where again we had these amenities that we had laid out, but hadn't worked with a landscape architect to really tell us what would work on site in terms of kind of recreational access and enjoyment. So while we have a map that shows the depth of Wassermann Lake, I don't necessarily know going into it what it requires to, get a boardwalk or dock through the cattail area, or what the right depth is going to be for people to be able to kayak. So kind of through that next phase of design work, it became clear that if we want to get people to enjoy the lake, to use the lake, we really did have to focus on that northern access where there is more depth, there's less cattail that you have to get through, and that it would really sort of create that programming element much better than the area to the south. You certainly could put a dock in that area. The question is whether it's worth the investment and whether people would really use it, and it's our recommendation that you not pursue that piece, but you could build it if that's a decision that you'd like to make.
Well, I just thought there would be more access to the lake. I mean, I thought that's what people wanted. Kayaks, they just need to, it doesn't have to be deep. It can be 2 feet and they can get out there. When I'm looking at the map, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it looks like it's 2 feet over there too until it comes out.
Councilmember Black, the area that we've identified, you can get to more like 6-foot depth with I think it's about 100-foot reach.
So do we have a list of the amenities that So a lot of folks are thinking that this original plan and this big wish list is actually going to come true. And so we want to make sure that we're clear about the fact that some of these amenities just exceed our budget. And so do we have a list of kind of what people were expecting and kind of where we are now? And as a result of that, how has that impacted our budget? I mean, when you don't put a skating rink in and lights and all of those kinds of things, you would think that the budget would decrease.
Sure. Councilmember McMillan, a lot of those items were not included in the budget cost estimate. So the warming hut, the skating were not included. And then the second access, it ends up being a little bit of a wash because the first access is more expensive than we had anticipated in the first budget estimate. So it's essentially, from a budgetary perspective, it's more sort of becomes kind of a combined line item. As far as other amenities more broadly, I can't think of something that has been eliminated. We're still providing four-season restrooms, so there are other winter activities on site. It's going to be a great place for snowshoeing or cross-country skiing. And, folks could ostensibly get through the cattails in the winter to get on the lake. I've walked out onto the lake from the site in the winter, so it does still have that, that piece. But we can sort of look more into it and see if there are other items that I'm not thinking of right now and make sure that that's clear. The other thing I would say is we did have a second open house that featured this new concept plan and had a lot of the same attendees that we've seen at the previous open houses. So I do think we've done our best to kind of get the message out about the direction that the design is going in currently.
I think too, just to tail on to that, as part of our open houses too, we kind of tried to gauge the interest from those that attended. And I know that ice skating was probably one of the least requested items that we tracked through the open house. And I know lake access was an important feature, but people didn't seem to be too concerned where that access ended up being, as long as that there was some sort of access within the site.
Do you want to speak to?
Yeah, if you want to introduce yourself, because I think you want to speak.
Yes. Mayor and Council, I'm Carlos Fernandez. I'm managing the project and principal at AFLA. I would just add in, not to revisit, I think Anna covered a lot of the issues well, but with a boat launch as well on the north side of the lake, you're fighting an ease of access. And so when we look at it, not having a good location, extremely long run to get out into the water, you can do it and you can make it work. At the cost and trying to identify the best and highest use for the site in a spot right on the lake where you can drive up and simply get your boat in the water, it really was kind of a question on if it made good sense or not and if it was a good use of resources. And so when we came into the project just a few months ago, those are the types of things that we started to cut through. The other part of it is the long access to get out to the dock. I mean, there's a lot of maintenance that comes along with docks. And so it's not that we're saying it can't be done, but it would be the recommendation not to do it for a whole variety of reasons. So,
What about the fishing dock over where people put their boats in the water and the public access?
yeah, in regards to how it would get used, or
No, rather than put a $400,000 boardwalk going to an island that you're gonna have to go to the public launch to get from what I understand, to get your kayak or whatever in, and to get onto the lake, and then you build a fishing pier off of that island, so it's kind of, everybody's gonna wanna go there. And we just have the fishing pier off where the boat launch is.
I guess
I mean, that's DNR there, but
yeah, I mean I guess it's possible.
rather than messing with that island at all and putting that
Yeah.
$400,000.
We took on all of the program as a priority and tried to balance that out. But I mean, your point is certainly a good one. It is another owner, so there's a different dynamic there. But for what we can control and trying to identify the best spot for a lake access within the property, we call it the island, but that access is the best. The nice thing about the site where the fishing pier is, and we've been out on the water and verified the locations, is we are at a point where the water is dropping off. And so we have cattails and that low water just to the south, I guess, and then just to the north, we have a deeper spot. And so from a fishing standpoint or even in the water access, there's some nice things that come along with that. So it's, from a more of a prime location and different things to fish, it worked out pretty well. So that's some of the other reasons that we suggested that.
So one of the early things that was brought up was we could have some kayaks on this site. The city would rent them or something like that, so you wouldn't have to bring your canoe or kayak in. Is that possible to have some kind of a kayak/canoeing site near the fishing pier? Or isn't there any room to put something like that?
One of the difficulties with the island site is just the access. And so I think there's probably a maintenance thing that would have to be considered. There is space there to do it. And then how that really functioned. We've worked with another county that has basically canoe racks. And there's ways that you can potentially manage that with unlocking them, but like serving the public, I think, is the main concern there. But it's physically, yes, like any of these things could happen, but I think it's what actually goes into making it possible is another thing that would have to get teased out. So those are kind of some of the parameters, but the infrastructure needed simply to just host kayaks isn't that significant.
Second question is, people were thinking about cross-country skiing in the wintertime, but if I was a skier, I'd want to come across a lake from some of the neighborhoods and come into the park, because that would be shorter for most people. So there's no place for the skiers to come up unless you build some kind of access at the pavilion. There's no place for the skiers to come up out of a lake.
Yeah, in the wintertime, I think you could establish that route without a lot of trouble, and that you could simply do a cutting, depending if you wanted it to come through sort of the wide band of wetland closer to the restrooms or wherever you might want it to be. There is some spots at the island where the grades are different and you're able to access the shoreline where it doesn't have such a wide band of wetland growth in front of it. And so those could be potential ways to establish kind of a lightly groomed track if that's something you wanted to pursue to bring people into the site.
So everything is dependent on the island. Everything's dependent on that. The fishing pier, getting water access, trying to get across the lake. It's all dependent on that if you want to have access to the lake.
Yeah, again, I think it's a prioritization. You can do a fishing pier elsewhere. It's a significant cost to do that in places outside of the wetland just because of the amount of infrastructure it takes to get out to the water's edge. The island was kind of delivered as a priority with the programming as well because of the unique environment. It is experientially a great amenity for the park. And the boardwalk was a priority as well for the wetland experience. So those are all kind of the different reasons that we are still looking at it. So
what is the, have you talked to the DNR about the boat launch area at all? Being able to incorporate any of those needs or wants from the citizens as far as fishing pier, kayak launch?
All those things exist there today, Councilmember Black.
They do?
Yep.
There's a fishing pier there?
Yes,
So,
a small one. It's right next to where the boat launch is. It's not a,
well, I've been in there. It's like,
It's really a pier for launching your
yeah,
boat. so
but it
you
is
can-
there. People do fish off of it. And you can bring kayaks there and launch your kayaks. It's a public access.
So,
And that was one of the part of the discussion that we had, that it's a much easier access for a kayak than trying to trudge through the site from the parking lot to bring your kayak all the way over to the shoreline. Just that access that the DNR provides there it's just a much easier access for that type of boating experience.
I would add to that, I mean, part of what we're providing here is a destination. So if people are launching their kayaks off of that boat launch, this gives them somewhere to paddle to. And they can access off of that fishing pier, come onto the island, and then walk into the site. So it does sort of tie in with the existing launch in that way. I mean, otherwise, as far as, improving the fishing pier or something like that on the DNR launch, I think that's really outside of the scope of the focus here. We're focused on how we're programming the site that we have this cooperative agreement around developing a park on. So that's where we focus our attention.
So my question would be, since we can't get the kayak and the canoe idea going, but it's really a nice site for snowshoeing and cross-country skiing, could we still think about the warming house for that and rental for cross-country skiing and snowshoeing as opposed to, or,
yeah,
what's that?
I agree, that makes a lot of, it would still be a destination, it would still be the nature thing, it's just that we're not doing a $400,000 boardwalk and an island out there that everybody has to go to get to the park, if they're gonna do a water access.
So I know as part of the initial, very, very early concept on an enclosed four-season shelter, the costs go up significantly from what you have today with the open-air pavilion. Just to be able to provide heat, utilities, et cetera, for that type of facility, to enclose it to a year-round is quite expensive.
So what we have, just so I'm clear, is an open pavilion that can seat 100 people, right?
Correct,
Four-season bathrooms.
correct.
If we do the boardwalk, we have access to the lake.
Correct.
Or to the island, excuse me. Is there a shelter on the island, picnic shelter on the island?
Not on the island, there will be like a picnic area available or seating.
Okay,
Or
so
there'd
like
be some
picnic
structure at the
tables.
top, at the highest point
Due to cost, that has been removed,
that has been removed.
yes.
So picnic tables on the island.
Or benches, seating of some sort.
Just had a big wooden table with some seating around it.
Okay. Is that, and then a playground.
Parking, trails throughout the site,
Okay.
small areas of gathering spaces off the site, 2 different play areas, and I think that's it. There's a significant amount of grading that needs to be done on the site, which is driving some of the costs for this. You look at it's nearly a 9-acre park that will require significant grading, some soil corrections, parking lot, I think it's a 33-person parking lot.
33, yeah, 33.
So there's a lot of work that will go into this park to complete it.
I want to be clear that if the council tries to change the design at this point, does it put the timing in jeopardy for putting the pier in for this winter?
Certainly. So, I mean, we are looking for authorization to bid the boardwalk this evening. We have made a significant amount of progress towards final design and have sunk a significant amount of cost into design, being at 60% and probably a little bit past that. So, we can certainly take feedback on design. But we are working on a very tight timeline to get to final design, with the priority being winter construction of the boardwalk and construction of the park in 2020. So, yes, we're on a
So
tight
it's-
timeline.
So if there's significant changes the council wants, is it safe to assume that the park would be delayed for construction until 2021 then?
Right now, Mayor Funk, the focus on getting the final design, if we kind of set the boardwalk piece aside, the focus on getting the final design is to hit a favorable bid climate. So we think that if we can go out for bid in January, that we'll hit a more favorable bid climate for starting construction in the spring. So, you know, if there's a delay in terms of getting it out to bid, it might not be a construction delay, it might be a budget impact. But it all depends on, you know, what the direction is, how much we're talking about changing, and just sort of, you know, we're kind of just looking for whatever feedback from you all.
Thanks. I'd like to hear from the council members. Is anybody suggesting these changes? I've heard a lot of discussion, but I'm not sure if you're actually suggesting changes or just asking questions. So can we, or is anyone actually asking for changes here to the plans?
I just wanted some clarification on what was left in this plan.
Oh, got it.
And so the plan as it is what we're going to be going out for bid for. So we'll have some more information when we get back, what this bid looks like. But tonight, we have to decide about this boardwalk.
Correct. My observation on the boardwalk is if this is gonna be a destination type of park where you just, because it's different and it's in a natural setting, if you don't have the boardwalk with the island, I think that takes, even though there's a price to it, I think removing the boardwalk and the island and the fishing pier is a big negative. And maybe we should just scuttle the whole project if we're gonna back off that because of the cost to what we would be left with. So I'm not in favor of removing it. I am totally devastated by the fact that we can't get any kind of interactivity such as kayaking or, skating or anything like that. And I'm still haven't recovered from that. The fact that the uses of the park have diminished. And now it's more of a destination, natural site for meeting. I still think it could be a nice park, but it's, I'm really torn. The boardwalk and the island, I think, unfortunately, it's got a price, but if you eliminated it, you're probably killing the value of the park.
Judy?
I don't know if we are killing the value of the park, to be honest.
Just an opinion.
And I don't know that we have to build it this winter. We could wait and see what kind of response we get from the residents as to how much use we get until we get this done. I mean, I went through it and I still have some issue with, when I was looking at the budget, I'm a little concerned about the fire pit, the safety of having a fire pit that people can just set fires. I did want to know about the grill. Are these grills What is it says grill, and then it says $1,500 and it's $12,000. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so the, Councilmember Black, the grills are, typical.
Barbecue grills?
Barbecue grill that you'd see at a picnic spot in a park.
Yeah, they're pulling those out of parks now because of things that are going on. They're setting things on fire.
Yeah, I mean, these are programming questions, so if they're not priorities, they can be removed. But we're just trying to fulfill what's been
Okay.
programmed in front of
Isn't
us.
part of the idea is that the city could offer this as a meeting place for groups, and there could be some kind of regular usage by various groups if you had a
Like a
wedding party or anniversary party or something like that.
Yeah, it hasn't been specifically outlined, but the capacity to rent the facility or a revenue generating opportunity for a party or two small parties, part of the design would lend itself to kind of fragmenting so that you could rent it and it could still function as well. And so those are all possibilities that all focus around kind of the meeting and gathering, place to celebrate in the park in that setting. So the location of all of those facilities matches real closely where the original concept started. It is the prime location in the park for opening up views and creating that, visual or experiential connection to the lake. And so those pieces of it are intact.
Councilmember Gregory, do you have anything to add? You haven't had a chance yet.
I'm sorry.
No, otherwise, I think this is gonna be a beautiful natural setting park. I think the island is a signature feature along with the boardwalk. Whether or not, you can drag a kayak out there, I don't think that's a deal breaker by any means. I like the concept of people that do want to kayak, if they want to launch it from the DNR, they've got a place to go. They can circle the lake, they can come back, and they can enjoy the park, they can have a picnic out there. But having the island with the boardwalk, I think it's gonna be a strong feature for families and everybody to enjoy, along with getting out to nature. I mean, we're building smaller and smaller lots in Victoria. People need a place to go, and this will be a wonderful place for them to enjoy. I'm all in favor of keeping the boardwalk, keeping the island. I'm excited about the whole thing. It's just a matter of, it's a nice shelter, getting out to be able to enjoy the lake and nature. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So did I hear a consensus then, council, that the majority wants to move forward with this as is? Is that accurate?
Not me.
No,
Councilmember Gregory and I were pretty,
Yeah. I'm in favor of going out to, let's get started on that boardwalk. Let's see what that thing is gonna cost us, and I'm in favor of going to that.
no, Judy, we've got the motion here. So before I call for that, council, is there any other further discussion? Hearing none, can I get a motion, please? Thank
Make
you.
a motion, we accept the Wassermann Lake Park 60% plans and authorize the MCWD to bid the boardwalk and oak pruning and removals. If bid is within 10% of the budget, no further council action is needed.
Can I get a second, please?
second motion.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nope.
Okay, motion carries 4-1. All right, thank you. Next item, Trish, item 7.3, approve the 2019 audit engagement letter.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So just a short background. The city had a 3-year contract with Abdo, Ike & Myers that ended with the completion of the 2018 audit. Earlier this year, the city council reviewed a policy related to professional services contracts. That policy requires the city to solicit proposals for professional services contracts every 5 years. The professional services contract policy is anticipated to be adopted by the council this coming January 2020 as a part of the city's overall policy manual adoption. AEM sends an audit engagement letter to confirm the understanding of services they will provide along with the agreed upon costs. The cost for these services for the 2019 audit is $30,275. Staff recommends the approval of the 2019 audit engagement letter with Abdo, Ike, and Myers. Bonnie, our audit manager, is present. If you have questions specifically about the audit, she'd be happy to answer any.
Okay, council, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I do. Bonnie, would you come up, please, and name and position for the record?
Of course. Thank you very much. My name is Bonnie Schwiger. I'm an audit manager with Abdo, Ike & Myers. Just a little background. I've been working on the city audit for about the last 6 or 7 years. So,
All right, perfect. as I thought about this, I actually wrote out a list of questions I'd like to ask you.
Wonderful.
And so I've got 11 questions here, and I wrote them down just so I didn't miss various things. So I want you to understand that these questions have nothing to do with you personally, but it has everything to do with the audit your firm has been providing to the city, all right?
Okay, great.
So with that, in my opinion, there are some examples of wasteful spending from the past, specifically former city managers buying dinner for staff and questionable credit card usage. And during your audits, and you said it's been 6 or 7 years, have you ever discovered these or similar types of items? And if so, did you ever note them in your audit reports or bring this to the council's attention?
I believe it was a couple of years ago where we did some more detailed testing of compliance with city's purchasing policies and legal compliance statutes as it relates to purchases of dinners and things like that. And that came about after conversations with various members of the council and yourself, and then also conversations with staff. Our audit does not test every transaction that flows through the city, and we also consider materiality when we're reviewing certain things. And we take that into consideration for how are we going to present this information in our audit report. Materiality plays a factor there. I do not remember the exact specifics on our conclusion on those, but no, I do not believe that we included them in our audit report or any findings related to those as far as wasteful spending goes.
All right, thank you. Second question. Dana and her new finance team have found 6 different accounts used for park and rec funds. Did you ever note those and ever note them in your audit report or bring this to the council's attention?
So I believe that those 6 different accounts that you're speaking about are different parks and rec funds that are separate types of funds for the city. So they would be included in the audit report and presented as different funds. As far as bringing it to the council's attention that they should be combined, that may have been a conversation that we had with the finance staff and what our recommendation might be. We don't typically recommend that funds are combined just to combine them, but really we just recommend that the city review their funds on an annual basis to determine how they're being used and how they can be used in the future. So I know that now we are going to be working with Tricia to get those combined for this upcoming audit.
All right, thank you. Dana and her new finance team found some various pots of money that I think you're now aware of. Some examples of this are the unused TIF funds and leftover road project funds in various accounts that were not already committed to a specific project. Did you know about these funds, and do you ever note them in your audit report or bring them to the attention of the council? And when I say bring them to the attention of the council, what I'm really referring to is kind of like an executive summary of here are some of the findings, right? Instead of buried in the long audit report, please.
Very in the detail. I mean, that's a good question. It can be hard to look at the detailed financial statements and really pick those things out if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. As far as the unused TIF funds, separate from the audit, we did prepare the city's TIF reports that are due to the state. Along with those preparation of TIF reports, I know that we did have some recommendations to the finance staff, and this was a few years ago, on that those excess funds should be used. So yes, we were aware of them and did have those conversations with the finance staff. And I know that following that, maybe the next year, a TIF cash flow study was done by, was it Northland Securities? They did a TIF cash flow study to look at how those excess funds, my understanding was they were going to look at how those excess funds could be used. So in that situation, yes, we were aware of those, and we did have those conversations with city staff. As far as the unspent bond proceeds, I'm not sure that we included it in an executive summary, but those were also things that we were aware of and did have conversations with city staff on possible uses for those unspent bond proceeds and that they did exist.
Okay, I think that's
Yeah.
a separate question later. We'll come back to that.
Okay, sounds good.
But that's fine. So it's come to my attention recently that former staff were exceeding their spending authority by using consultants without city manager or council approval. Did you ever discover this, and did you ever note it in your audit reports or in an executive summary to the council?
So that's a great question. So it goes back to a similar, what we talked about with that first question, or maybe it was the second question. Materiality comes into play. So we did look at that information and how it complied with the city's policy, and then compared that to our materiality to see if it's something that we needed to include in the audit report. I don't remember exactly what our conclusion was on the spending. I would have to go back and look at the documentation just to make sure I get it exactly right. But it's not something that, I believe it did not rise to a materiality level that we included in our audit report.
So even though they're exceeding their authority, it didn't get brought up because you didn't feel it was, as the auditors, you didn't feel it was material. Is that accurate?
Not necessarily. I don't remember exactly what our conclusion was on if they were in fact exceeding their authority. I'd have to go back and look at our audit documentation on that.
Okay, so let me be crystal clear here. I'm not referring to the city manager and their authority. I'm talking about other staff that were actually hiring consultants and exceeding, in fact, the amount of the authority even the city manager had in contracts.
Was this 2018 or 2017 or?
We don't
Which
know.
year are you?
Because I could find no reference to it, and it was going on, and then it was recently discussed by the new city manager, and I was informed of it. I'm trying to find out whether in the past you've ever noticed this or brought it to the council's attention.
It's not something that I think we've noticed in the past. I'd be very curious to look into it with our audit. If it's something that was going on in 2019, then we would definitely want to address it in our 2019 audit. I will say again, we don't look at every transaction, so we don't see everything that flows through the city. There are things that once they come to our attention, we will test and we will look at, so.
Okay, so let's continue on. I was told former staff were doing sole source procurement out of the Public Works Department, and this is again, former staff, before Dana and her finance team took over. Did you ever discover this, and did you ever bring it to the council's attention or report it?
Did you say sole source procurement? So they were going out and making purchases without getting any authorization besides their own?
Correct.
Was
They
that-
weren't getting second bids on some of the purchases.
Okay. So our bid testing that we do, so we do bid testing and we select, we read through the minutes, we discuss with staff, we do a sample selection of the different bids and quotes that were received and approved. If anything ever came to our attention where proper bids or quote process was not being followed, we would most definitely bring that to the attention of the council and to city management. So I can't remember when we've had a bid or a quote finding in the report recently. I would have to look back to see if we've included anything like that in the last few years. But
So off the
that
top
for
of your
sure we
head, you don't
would.
remember ever reporting this?
Not off the top of my head, but I have to say I didn't go back and review any of our prior audit reports before coming here, which I could definitely do that. I could go and look and report back. But yes, that is something that we would for sure report if the proper quote and bid process was not being followed.
All right, the next question, I know changes were made a number of times because of some comments I made to Andy Berg once I became mayor about what I felt to be some weak finance controls, specifically around payroll and some of the checks and balances that I
Sure.
would expect to see. To the best of my knowledge, those changes were never documented, and I think I'd asked Andy before, and I never saw them in like an executive summary to the council. To your knowledge, were they ever actually documented and put in a written report that those changes were made?
Do you mean from our side, that we would have
Correct. As the
documented and
auditors,
reported
you-
back that the changes were made?
Right, that there was some weaknesses in the controls, you made some recommendations to the staff at that time, and then I never saw that in any sort of the reports from the auditor, even though you guys were aware of it, because I spoke directly to Andy about that.
I don't know if it was ever documented and submitted to the council as, hey, these changes were made. I do know that when those weaknesses were brought to our attention, we sat down with finance staff and went through in detail, here's what we see as an optimal control environment. And here are some things that we see in other cities that you could implement, and we brought those recommendations to city staff. I don't know if it was ever something that we documented then and brought and told you guys about that they were changed.
thank
I think we
you.
left that to the city staff to do that
Okay.
communication.
I'd wanted Andy to be here. I know that that didn't work out. So again, these questions, don't take these personally, but I'm trying to understand a lot of these things that's
No,
going on.
not personal at all. You're
So, okay.
doing great. Good questions.
Do you believe that any elected official should be able to ask questions about anything that the city auditor does in your role as far as auditing the city?
So should you be able to ask us any questions that you?
Right,
that
anything
you
about the
wish?
audit or what you're doing and any advice you provide the city? Do you think that the auditing firm should respond to those questions?
I think that you can ask us questions and then we should respond with the city manager and with the city council as appropriate.
Okay, so I would agree with that. And the reason I'm asking that question is because multiple times I asked Andy about payment of legal fees, and we're not going to go into the back history, but he always told me he refused to answer those questions without council approval of the questions. Do you know of any other time where any elected official can ask questions and get told, no, they can't get that answer?
I do not. If he was thinking that he needed to talk to the council as a whole about that matter, I know that with some of the legal issues surrounding that question, I mean, maybe it was something that he felt needed to be addressed to everybody and not just one particular person. So,
Okay, hang on a second.
and can I go back and say again, as appropriate? So,
Okay, that's
yeah.
fine.
Thank you.
Were you aware during any of your audits that until this year, Dana changed the internal budgeting process to include all department heads, that prior to that, former staff, only the finance director and the city managers actually did the budgeting process and the department heads weren't involved? Were you aware of that?
We were probably aware of that on some level, that the department heads weren't as involved as they are now. We just recently had the opportunity to sit down with Tricia and Dana and go through some of the changes that have been happening at the city, and they informed us of the changes in the budgeting process, and those are great changes. I don't think we get into the specifics, the actual detail of how that budgeting process is being handled. We look at the budget more as an overall, how is it being approved by you folks, and how is the council and department heads being made aware of the budget throughout the year.
All right, but you never informed the council that was the process that was being used, that the department heads weren't in there? I mean, you were aware, you talked to staff, but never informed the council?
I don't know that we were necessarily aware of that much of the details of the process. And again, we have certain conversations with city staff, and then we communicate with you all what we are required to communicate with you. The budget process is not one of those required communications. If there was a significant deficiency with the control process around the budget, we would certainly bring that to your attention. So nothing in our conversations with city staff ever led us to believe that there was a control issue with the budget process.
Okay.
Do you feel like there was a control issue with the budget process?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Back in 2015, the city borrowed $1.7 million for a $600,000 project, and I think maybe you were alluding to this earlier in your comments about the bonds. And so that money almost went into arbitrage this month because it was sitting there in accounts. It's $1.1 million, and then some of it was used for the Steiger Lake, and then the remaining funds, I think, are now going to be used for the purchase of the Wassermann Park. But in the course of your audit, did you ever discover that? Because when you talk about materiality, this is clearly material, that there's $1.1 million sitting there in an account. And if so, did you ever note that or write that in an executive summary for the council to read?
We might have written that those funds and those unspent bond proceeds were remaining in those accounts. That definitely would have been part of our conversations with city staff about, here are things that you should draw your attention to. Here are things that you should look at when you're considering what's coming up. We definitely would have been aware of it. did we put it in an executive summary for you all to read? I'm not 100% sure that we did. I can't say that we didn't either. So it is generally something in our management letter that we provide to you guys. We do list all the debt service funds, and we list all of the capital project funds. And with those capital project funds and debt service funds, we review very closely the remaining balances in there. And are they committed? Are they restricted? Are they assigned? Are they unspent bond proceeds? And generally, in those presentations, if they're unspent bond proceeds, we talk to you guys about that because it's really important for you to know. You need to know if there's arbitrage stuff that's coming up because that has a big impact on the city. I cannot say 100% that we did, but I would have to feel that we would have because it's part of our normal process to do so.
Right, I'm sure some of this stuff is probably buried in the audit report, right?
But in that executive summary, where it's important for you to hear those details that are for your guys' decision making, I think it would have been in there, yes, not just buried.
Isn't that something that should have been flagged, though, as like red alert kind of thing? If we bond for 3 times as much as we needed for a project, and then we've got those funds sitting in an account someplace that could have a huge negative impact on our bond rating, isn't that something like a red flag's like, you guys need to know about this?
It is, yep, and I would imagine that it would have been in that report, that we would have talked to you.
Yeah, folks, let me, I
sorry.
still have the floor. I've got 2 more questions,
Okay.
and then that's all right. I've got 2 more questions, and then we can open up for council discussion. And I do want the council to weigh in on this. So as part of this, in the next to last question, the former staff received a number of awards for our finances and AAA bond rating and all of that. And so I'm curious, for your point of view, if we're getting the awards for this, but yet we're finding this, for lack of a better way, this leakage of data and questionable as far as any of these things actually being reported to the city, at least to the council. They may have been reported to staff, but not necessarily to the council. How do you reconcile that when the purpose of the audit is to try to protect the taxpayers' money? But I think there's arguments that can be made that money was leaking out in various amounts. Whether it's material or not, I think is a secondary question to the fact that the controls weren't in place. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
I think that's a very interesting question. When you say leaking, is it okay if I ask a question about that?
Sure.
What do you mean specifically? Do you mean that, things were being purchased with only one quote? Do you mean that the process for, over the spending limits? What do you mean by leaking?
Yeah, all of that. There's money here that we have a duty and a fiscal responsibility of the taxpayers to make sure that that money is maintained and spent properly. But yet there's examples in here where policies weren't followed, that people were doing things, they weren't involved in the budgeting process, the department heads, they were doing sole source procurements, right? Then we find out this money almost went into arbitrage. And this kind of gets into some of my final comments, but that's what I mean by leaking. There's a whole bunch of things going on here. The fact that I said some of the controls, and even the audit partner said, yeah, we have to change these controls, or at least recommended that, yeah, we make some adjustments. Specifically what I'm referring to is the payroll processing, right? But yet, to the best of my knowledge, and I'd be more than happy if I missed some of this in some of these audit reports, but since I was mayor, I haven't seen these in any of these executive summaries, and I'm not a CPA or a CFO, so I can read that budget book 3 times from a day and not understand what it is I'm looking at. So I would expect these kind of issues would be brought to the council's attention and brought up in such a way that you don't have to be a CPA to understand what's going on. So that's what I mean by leaking. So it seems to me there's a disconnect between the city receiving awards, but yet this kind of activity is going on also.
Sure. So I will say that for the audit report that is prepared and the award that is received is the certificate award for financial reporting, excellence in financial reporting. That award is given for reporting in line with Governmental Accounting Standard Board requirements, for reporting in line with GAAP, with governmental accounting and auditing practices. So that is a large piece of that award, reporting in line with those authorities. As far as what you're talking about, that's a little bit more on like the legal compliance side, and I would like to look into that more, especially the sole procurement, and if things weren't following the policies, then that would be an internal control area that we would need to look into further. It's my understanding in working with the past finance staff that everything was above board. We come into an audit, we trust but verify. That's one of the things that we say often. And Kelly, we trusted her, but we did verify the information that she was telling us and review those internal controls in a serious way. And so if what you're saying is that, those controls weren't followed, those controls weren't good enough, then I think we need to take a really close look at our next audit. And I would love to talk with you in more detail about those things, just to make sure we're on the same page.
All right, so the final question I have for you is, over the past 6 or 7 years when you've been doing the audits for the city and you as your firm, not you personally, or actually, were you the on-site audit manager for each of those years?
I've been the on-site audit manager for the last 4 years, I think.
Okay, and
about
somebody
4
before you?
years. Yep, and then before that, I believe Andy Berg, he's a partner, and then he was also kind of the on-site manager.
Back
Yeah.
Okay. Throughout this time, who is it that's actually set the scope for your audit? Is it the former finance director, the city council, the city manager? Is it defined by statute? How does that work?
And when you're referring to scope, are you referring to the amount of testing that we do, the information that we look at, or are you referring to like our materiality levels?
The materiality levels, I think, are defined by GASB as to what's material. What I'm
Right.
referring to is what areas you look at. So the scope is, when you come into the audit, what areas do you look at, and who is it that decides what areas you're going to look at on any particular year? The engagement letter. Who did you work with to get the engagement letter prepared and designed and then signed?
So the engagement letter is prepared in accordance with GAP and those standards. It has wording in there that we are required to communicate to tell you what we're doing. As far as the scope of the audit and how we pick what are we going to look at every year, it's a risk-based audit approach. And so we carefully review and have conversations with the city about what are your focuses this year? What's going on in the city? What are your large areas of risk where a transaction might be misstated? So when you issue bonds, we spend more time looking at debt, things like that. When you have large capital projects, we spend more time looking at that. When you create a new TIF district and you have interfund loans that you set up like you have in the last couple of years, we spend more time looking at those. So that's something that we decide as an audit team as far as what our approach is going to be.
And that's based on input from the staff?
No, that's based on conversations that we have with staff, not necessarily input. They do not drive our audit procedures or the things that we look at. That is completely our decision and our judgment as far as how much testing are we going to do in a particular area and where do we consider the risks to be. And we get that information, we come to that conclusion by discussing with staff, reading the minutes, talking with you all when we call to do those charged with governance interviews.
All right, thank you. So my final
Yes.
comment here, you may stay there, you may get more questions here. I wanted the public to know, and I wanted the council to know, that most of these items we just talked about, until Dana and her new finance team took over in March of this year, other than a couple of things that I managed, I actually spoke with Andy about, I didn't know any of this. So this has all been uncovered by Dana and Trish. And by the way, you guys have done a tremendous job since Trish, Dana, and then early on Cindy took over in March of this year. So these things have all come up, and even though I've been the mayor for almost 3 years now, I'm only finding out about them in these past 6, 7, 8 months. And so that's why I put this list together, because I wanted to get your input, and you say a lot of this is materiality, or you talk to staff, but I never saw any reports. And I just find this pretty disturbing to see that what I call this potential linkage of the taxpayers' money, we're paying you guys to do these audits, And yet, none of this stuff has been brought to at least to my attention since I've been the mayor, again, with a couple of exceptions when I spoke directly to Andy. And that, to me, is rather disturbing. And just also for the council's information, I sat down before this meeting, and Dana didn't know I was going to do this, but as I was preparing for the meeting today, I thought it would be better just to write these out, so I touched on all of the topics, and I asked Dana to look at this to say, Dana, do I have this factually correct? And Dana confirmed for me that what I described here is factually correct. Now, she wasn't here before that, but this to me is really disturbing. If we're going to have audits and protect the taxpayers' money, we need to be finding these kind of things. So I have asked this council before and previous councils that we need to do a controls review. And at this point, you've been with the city, your firm has done with the city for so long that I really think that it's inappropriate for us to continue. I think we need an independent controls review done by an independent third party to look at our controls that's not part of the audit, to find out if there's more here. It's not as a question to Dana, you or Trish in your capabilities, but I'm thinking it's more aligned to help you as you drive things forward, to see if there's other gaps that you guys want to take a look at and bring recommendations back. And then secondly, I think we need a new independent auditor. I think you guys are too familiar with the city and what's been going on, and hence we need a different audit firm to come in and do the next audit until such time as we can do a longer-term audit. So with that, if you'd stay there, I'm sure you're going to have other council members ask questions. Council, go ahead. Who'd like to go?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Let's see, I'll pick a department head. Ann, you've been here for quite a while. Have you never been involved in the budget process before?
I have been involved with the budget process every single year.
Every single year,
Every single year.
at a fairly decent detail level?
Yes,
Very deliberate. Your input is accepted, it's communicated?
yes.
From my point of view, having been exposed to the different department heads over a period of years, I've been on the council 4+ years, plus I was on the finance committee for many years prior to that. I really don't believe that in terms of the key departments, the department heads weren't involved in the budget process. There may be somebody at a desk out there who's involved in a certain department that maybe wasn't fully aware of the budget process. I think all the significant departments were probably involved in the budget process. If you came to a different conclusion, I'd like to have a separate discussion on that. But I just tried the first manager I saw, and she said she was involved in the budget process. So we can't have these blanket statements like this. Arbitrage problem, what project was that we bonded for? That we bonded for?
That was the undergrounding.
That was, yeah, I knew.
Okay, that was, first of all, as far as I know, everybody around here knew that the amount that we thought the project was gonna cost was double or triple what it actually did cost, and that was actually an honest mistake. And everyone around here, including me, knew that those funds were sitting there and we had to do something over a period of time. We couldn't just sit on them. That was not something that was hidden at all. Single source purchasing. Okay, so somebody was not going out for bid. Which departments was it? We're on public, you don't have to say specific names, but I mean, did this happen often?
It was happening out of the Public Works Department.
Public Works Department. Okay, was there any fraud involved?
No, we're not, let me be clear here. I never alleged fraud.
Okay, but these single source purchases were probably, certainly for legitimate items. They just didn't follow procedure to the letter and get multiple bids.
Yeah, and
The money that the city spent was being spent on something that was legitimate. It wasn't leaking out into the street. So the positions that were exceeding their authority, which positions were we talking about there?
There were two different positions that were doing that, and Dana could, I have no desire here to throw former staff.
Okay. There are irregularities that you can find in any business over a period of years. There was no fraud, we
None that
don't know
we
that
know
there
of.
was any waste. This problem with the budgeting is not a problem. I mean, has Dana added value to the budget process? Yes. But was there no budget process at the department level? That's absolutely not true. I've witnessed it on the finance committee many times. When in the budget process, the different managers would come into the room. I saw the director, I saw the public works manager, I saw others, year after year. I'm not sure where that is coming from. So I understand Mr. Mayor, you've taken an analytical look at this and you feel there's some kind of problem, but I'm not disputing that we should evaluate other firms every 5 years. But to paint this picture that our current audit firm has been negligent, I don't feel that way at all. Having been around here on the finance committee, on the city council, on the planning commission, knowing these people, did people make mistakes? Do they make mistakes? And then, there's an understanding of the audit process. They are taking sampling. That's just my comments.
Okay, Deb?
I have no particular comment, but we are running up against a time clock here. I don't think we have time to select another audit firm to take care of our auditing for this year. And I know that we've been pretty clear about that, and we've also been pretty clear about the fact that we want to change our process around how we choose auditors. So I think I don't want to cut anybody short who wants to speak, but I think to move this process forward, I'm not sure that we have any time to evaluate another auditing firm for this year. So I would be in favor of making a motion that we accept whatever the motion is here.
Approve the 2019 audit engagement letter with Abdo Eichenmeyers LLP in the amount of $30,275.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Hold that. Judy, any comments?
Well, actually, I agree with Deb. I think it's too late now to try to change an auditor. I think next year we can definitely put a bid out and see what we come to. But at this point, I don't think we should.
All
It's
right.
too late.
Councilmember Gregory?
Is there any way we can change the scope of the upcoming audit that could satisfy some of these concerns?
Good question. I like that.
And may I address that
Yes.
question? I would love to work with the council to include those risks that you have brought up. If you have concerns about those, and city staff has become aware of things that need to be addressed, that would be a risk for the city, we need to test those things, and we need to address that. And I would love to build that into the scope of our audit to make sure that we're looking at the right things, and then report back to the people that it concerns, and make sure that it's understood exactly what those conclusions are, and include that in an executive summary that can be understood. So yes, we can most definitely work together on the scope there to make sure that those things are included.
All right, thank you. Final comments from me. I want to be clear, I never alleged fraud conducted or that anybody perpetuated any fraud upon the city. But I think it's clear from these examples that there's questions about how spending was done. And I went through, in fact, a lot of the credit card statements, and I found questionable purchases on those statements. But simply because of the materiality question, wasn't worth the time and effort to go through and let me finish. And finish auditing all of that information on my own. So I stand by these statements, and I think it's critical to note that when I was In the first 2 years, when I was asking, do we have funds available for crosswalks and trail connections and other things I was interested in as the mayor, I never was told about these extra pots of money, and there's nearly $2 million that we found in the last 8 months. And it wasn't until Dana and her team came in and took over that I began to find, or I was at least informed of all of this stuff. So it may have been buried in an audit report. Some council members may have known about this, but until the last 6 months, I didn't know any of this, which is why, in my opinion, the audit should have been highlighting these issues, because these issues were going on, including in the last 2 years as I was mayor. So there's no need to continue to discuss this further. I think I've made my points. If there's any other further discussion, council, if not, can I get a motion?
The motion's made.
Motion's made.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, motion carries 4-1.
Yeah.
So that was Plonka, no?
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you
Again,
very
Bonnie,
much.
this wasn't personal.
Nope, I totally understand, and I appreciate the opportunity to work with the city, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Okay, well.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
sure we'll be talking.
Good job.
The Cindy, 7.4, liquor liability requirements?
Yes. So at the previous meeting, the council approved Alliance to reduce their liquor liability to $1 million, as was the case before we upped it last year in 2018. And since then, we've looked at, the league is recommending $1 million liability with the tort liability and other stuff that the attorney addressed last time. He recommended the 2 million and, the 1.5 million, but insurance companies only do it in $1 million increments. So we are looking for direction now from council for staff to follow. Do we go with the 1 million or the 2 million for the liquor liability? We have found that with the liquor liability, the increase in premiums is quite substantial from the 1 million to 2 million. And we have a Lions representative here that can attest to anything if we need to, is Brett Romaninski is the president. And also when I had talked to the Lions previously, they had said they've never had a claim. And I am not aware of any other claims on the temporary liquor license, but I wouldn't be notified all the time on that, I guess. But I would assume the city would be if we got sued.
Thank you, Cindy. Unless the council, I mean, you're free to make a statement or anything to add?
Nothing beyond that's in the study.
Perfect, okay. Council discussion?
I would favor keeping it at the $1 million level. I think for our nonprofits, it's a deal breaker.
Right.
Go up to 2 million.
Agreed?
Agreed.
I have a question. Am I to understand that we have a program called the TULIP program? So that, the Lions, if they wanted to, they'd have their insurance set at $1 million. They could buy supplemental policy through us at a reasonable rate. What is the purpose of mentioning this TULIP program?
Well, it's available to them, but it's for $1 million, and it'd be for just that event. I don't think they cover it for a full year. And Dana has her hand up.
Councilmember Vogt, Mayor, members of the council, thank you. Yes, this is actually a program that's sponsored by the city, but it's put on through our insurance broker and made available just to provide, sometimes people, organizations usually have an insurance provider that they're working or a broker that they're working with, and sometimes they might question whether they're getting the most competitive rates, but who do they go to get a second quote? They may not have that relationship or time to really be calling around. And so this program has been made available to organizations that are having one-time events at on city property, and they could either purchase directly through that TULIP program or go through their own provider. But it's an opportunity for them to get coverage if they don't have someone they're working with, or to see if they've got a competitive quote from in comparison
So it's
to their
not meant to
others.
be a supplement?
It's not meant to be a supplement.
Okay.
Got it. Council, further discussion?
I called Tulip today because I wanted to understand what would happen if we did do the 2 million. She says, we only do $1 million. I said, would they have to buy 2 policies? She says, you can't do that. And she said that it's through the National League of Cities, and that's the way it is nationally. It's $1 million. So because of Minnesota deciding for some unknown reason that it needs to be $1.5 million, rather than trying to make everybody else buy $2 million, we probably need to go to the state and tell them to quit it.
Can we put that?
Good luck with that.
Can we put that on our legislative agenda, just to quit it? I just like that blanket statement of quit it.
A motion, quit it.
A motion to quit it.
The, Councilmember Gregory, anything to add?
No comment. No, that,
All right, so I think I heard a consensus for leaving it at 1 million, is that correct?
Yes.
Do we need a
an
motion?
official? I make a motion that we set the liquor liability requirement for use of city-owned property at $1 million.
Thank you. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Quit it. Last one.
I make a motion that they just quit it.
Last item for the regular agenda, and 7.5, authorized design for parking lot improvements at Lions Community Park.
Sure,
Please.
thank you, Mayor, Council. As you know, Lions Park is our kind of our central park within the community. It's about a 21-acre park. It has been around for close to 50 years, with the center parking lot being a gravel parking lot pretty much all its life. We have actually year-round programs that run out of Lions Park. With our programs, the Victoria Vics, the Holy Family girls softball and boys baseball program, the CAA program. We had over 140 pavilion rentals this year, and so the use keeps going. We also have many special events. So just to try to come up with a rough estimate of users, we estimate at least about 50,000 people visit the park on an annual basis. Back in 2009, the north lot, which is now adjacent to the Lions Pavilion, was reconstructed in 2009 as part of the Lions Street Improvement Program. We did look at improving the lot at that point in time, and the council decided not to do it, basically because of a cost factor. So we continue to chug along. The park, and it became very obvious this year. We do experience it on a every single spring basis. We have significant frost boils. The water just has nowhere to go, so it sits in the parking lot, and I know this year in particular was bad because of the long winter. The frost was in the ground, 7-8 feet deep. Then we had all the lovely spring rain. So this actually, I took this picture in towards the end of May. We still were having issues in July this year with the parking lot. It doesn't have any stormwater management. It's just seen its useful life come and go, I think. So what we are looking to do is have the council authorize a design team to come in and start looking at the parking lot itself, to survey it, to get a good layout so we understand how many more parking stalls we can get. Because if you've ever been to an event here, people park all over the place. So there's just no order. And I know we did have a lot of people get stuck in the parking lot this year. Anyways, we did send out RFPs. We had 3 that were returned to us based on the knowledge of the project and cost. The staff is recommending that TKDA be the design, get the design phase for this project in an amount not to exceed $18,600, and this would come out of the park fund, so we can look at construction hopefully in 2020.
All right, council discussion.
I'm good with it.
Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to authorize TKDA Inc. to provide design phase services in an amount not to exceed $18,600 for the Lions Community Parking Lot Improvement Project.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, roundtable. Dana, anything?
Nothing from Roundtable, Mayor.
Council?
No.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Sorry, it was on the other, I had to flip the page over. Senior Commission.
I wanted to, I thought it was time to get the senior commission going again.
These aren't them.
I know. These this is my next thing. I was hoping that for next year, we could start the senior commission again. I think it's an important asset for the community, and it brings value to our senior citizens, and that they can help us with issues for seniors, such as housing information, referral services, transportation, operations, that type of thing. And I'd like to get it going again.
For senior issues.
Yeah.
Is what, okay. Council comments?
We had an active senior commission, who can help me, that actually provided some really great input for the council, and I think it's a great idea. Let's find some folks.
Now that I'm a senior citizen,
I think nobody applied for it for the last 2 years, so it was part of the process.
It was part, and they all resigned.
yeah, well, I want to bring it back.
Yep.
So with the next commission stuff.
Yeah,
So it'll be advertised like in January.
yeah.
Okay.
Right, the, Councilmember Gregory?
No, I think it is important, but I think it was really disappointing, the group that we had. When things were a little bit rocky, they all up and quit.
Yeah.
Placed all the blame on the mayor, which was unfounded. I think there was plenty of blame to go around, so the leadership we had was really turned their back on the seniors, and it was really a disappointment.
So,
Things got a little rocky, they took their ball home and said, because
weren't
we don't
gonna
like
play.
the mayor, we're not gonna play.
okay, well, we all do now, so.
All right, I'll give you the $100.
So I think we can get some new
Hopefully, we
new
get some
interest.
people that are more interested in serving the seniors than pulling another political stunt, so yeah.
So
I'll hand it up if you want.
I'd like to see it also, but I want to get rid of all vestiges of the past, not call it the same thing. We can call it a senior commission.
I like the senior commission, I like that.
That's fine. So I support it also. And it sounds like the council is unanimous in supporting it and starting in next year,
Yeah.
Yep,
right? Council, is that right?
We have a process by which we
Yeah, we do.
recruit commission members, yeah,
All right,
fantastic.
Dana, do you need any sort of a motion on that since we're creating a committee?
It's still valid. I guess the name change, I don't know that it would.
Yeah, I don't know if we ever took action to actually
dissolve it.
No.
dissolve it, so I don't think.
I
we
don't
need
think
a
it ever was officially, right? But I don't want that same name because it's got all sorts of negative connotations.
Yeah.
Do you need a motion from us to change the name?
We'll just change it.
All right,
I think it was changed once before, so it might have been senior commission at one time anyway.
And mayor and members of the council, when we bring it back, you're gonna have to give us some direction on recruitment and how large do you want it to be? So when we'll bring you an item back where we can just get some direction.
Basic
We
staff
can make some
report.
recommendations in
Yeah.
a staff
Yep.
report, and you can
I'm gonna
react
do
to
an
that.
outline for you and everything. I just wanted to, before I did any work on it, to
All
make
right.
sure
I
it was
have a
okay.
discussion item, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
One of the problems with the earlier senior commission, or whatever we called it, senior committee, I think.
Victoria for a lifetime.
Yeah, Victoria for a Lifetime is, they did not want to be corralled into the structure of a commission where they had to record their meetings and that sort of thing. So I think you should make sure
That
you're
was-
starting it up.
That was discussed early on in 2017. I reviewed emails on that. That issue was not the reason they resigned.
That, I'm not saying it was, but it was a big issue. So,
It was, and when it was a discussion whether we should keep it a formal committee or an informal committee. They were very much opposed to putting it into an informal committee. They wanted the status of having a formal committee. They just didn't want to be recorded. And we agreed that that was fine early on in 2017.
Well, I like the recording, so.
I think we have a duty. We can take up that question. This,
Do it all.
right, this is just the roundtable, so I don't want to get into discussions about what we will or won't not do. But I think there's a valid question on recording that. And also, don't we have coming up something about the finance committee and whether that will remain?
We're gonna have that as a discussion item at your next meeting on November 25th.
Okay, all right, so we can take, there's some valid questions there. I think we need to discuss that when it's an agenda item so the public can weigh in too.
Okay, good.
Anything else on roundtable? Okay, reports. Bob, go first. We'll wait for Bob to finish and then Dana can go.
So,
I didn't hear
Since
Bob finish.
Bob's not here, Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to jump in, and the only thing I have for you this evening is I just want to make sure that members of the public know, and hopefully you all have received this. In the mail. So Gwen Campbell, our communications manager, has done a fantastic job kind of giving our Victoria's Spirit, our quarterly newsletter, a little bit of a facelift. We have a new design, reformatted, a really nice layout, and we also have a new feature, the Mayor's Corner. So each quarter, the mayor will be sending a special message to the residents of our community as part of this newsletter. So this is our new design. We're really proud of it, and we hope that people will enjoy it. And we just ask, we're not hearing anything from people yet, so we like to hear feedback. So we would love to hear from our residents on what they think. This was, and I tried to catch Gwen before we left, there's no additional cost for us to do this. So this is either a budget savings or budget neutral. Is what my understanding is, and we feel like it's a much better product. But if you're hearing any feedback from the community, from the residents, we would love to hear what you're hearing, and we would love to hear directly from them on what they think about this.
Perfect, thank you. Kudos to Gwen for taking that on, by the way. With that, Deb, any reports?
No, Mayor.
Tom?
no,
Judy, you must have a report.
pictures.
Well, look at the pictures. Our final event, we had about 300 people that showed up. I took some pictures to show you how I designed it. I just want to tell you that.
You didn't know that Judy's a traffic engineer too.
It's like,
Fantastic.
you can see, I had them check in. People were so happy that we did this, and they were, I mean, the way we had it circled around, I mean, everybody that helped said that people just kept saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, I heard you came.
I did.
So that was nice.
Yeah, I went out there and spent some time. This is coming up as a discussion item, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so
November
I'll share the
25th.
comments there, but boy, the response from every single person I talked to was overwhelmingly positive. And I will note that everybody agreed that it'd be a great idea to maybe pitch in a couple of bucks and use that money to pay volunteers that would volunteer to man the place. But we'll talk more about
All
that
right.
later. Sorry,
All right.
we shouldn't get into a discussion here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
But
finish your
I just
report.
want you to know that, you know, I kind of went through the list and I kind of looked at where the people were coming from. About 15% of,
Can you get this?
15%, this is the map of Victoria with the precincts, 1, 2, and 3. And I can tell you that precinct 1, mainly over here and over in here, we don't have a lot of homes over in here, but about 15% of the people came from that area. Precinct 2, which is all your Katy Hills, Wintergreen, all over there, that was about 60%. The people came from there. The District 3 kind of cut off, at the Lake Town. People are coming from Lake Town now. Trees are starting to get bigger, but about the 35% of the people came from here. So I can see it growing in this area as well. So I just wanted you to see where they're coming from.
So let's get those maps into the packet for the council discussion so the public can see that, and we can cover that when that comes up in the council. I think that's in the next, you said, Dana, next meeting?
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Black, if you get us any documentation, we'll include that in the staff report as part of the November 25th packet.
This is on those Victoria website. This is the City of Victoria elections precinct boundaries. I just printed it out and I just counted it.
Nope.
And that's how I came up with that.
Got it. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
Can I just say thank you to Judy for her hard work and
Yeah,
her diligence and her dedication
Hey,
to that
hey,
project.
good point.
You are a Victoria treasure.
And now when we need a traffic engineer, we know who to
We
call.
know exactly where we can find one.
Tom?
No report.
I have no report, other than we'll talk about it more, but I was shocked at the lines of cars and the overwhelmingly positive response. And we'll talk a little bit more about that next week, like I said. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Discussion, hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned.